Welcome to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and I founded an eco-conscious pottery company called Oxford Clay. Now, I don't just make pottery, I make resources such as books and courses for other potters who want to be more eco-conscious in their pottery practice. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's about me sharing everything I've learned with you, and I can't wait to get started. Let's go! Hello, so before we get on with the episode, I wanted to tell you about two completely free guides that I've made just for you about pottery. And the first guide is called How to Make a Pottery Glaze. So if you've ever been curious about how to make your own pottery glaze, this guide will show you exactly how to make your own glaze from start to finish. It tells you all the ingredients you need. It tells you step by step how to make the glaze, how to stay safe when glaze making, and it's got a stoneware glaze recipe in there. And if you've been curious about how to fire pottery, I have also made a guide on electric kiln firing. So this guide will tell you all the different terms that's used in like kiln firing, and what they mean, and it also takes you through the exact firing schedule that I use to do my bisque firing and also stoneware glaze firing. So it's got all the temperatures in there, all the timings in there, and both of these guides are available from the Oxford Clay website at www.oxfordclay.co.uk/resources for potters. Okay, let's get on with the episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk to you about, this is something I've been thinking a lot about, because sometimes when I think of like, what would be a good podcast episode, I think about sort of like how to kind of distill, encapsulate, some of the stuff I've learned in in a good kind of, podcast type format. And so one of the things I was thinking about was, what are my sort of top tips for making pottery? And, what, like, if I could distill it down into one top tip, what's my top tip in terms of making pottery? And so this is what I wanted to talk to you about today. And it might surprise you actually, the tip I'm about to talk to you about, because it doesn't seem like it's pottery related. So you might think the top tip might be something like, I don't know, go to a class, or practice doing this thing or something like that. But it's actually not. It's actually about mindset, because I have to say, I think mindset around pottery is like your absolute key tool in terms of doing pottery, getting better at pottery, matching up that idea of what you want to make in your head with the reality of what you can actually make. So my number one pottery making tip is to be kind to yourself. Okay, so again, just to say, this is, you might think this is nothing to do with pottery, but it really, really does have something to do with pottery. It has everything to do with pottery. So I want to think about this, being kind to yourself, in the context of learning any new skill. So, think about pottery. Sometimes, particularly at the beginning, it can be so frustrating learning pottery. I found it. Well, I don't know. Actually, I've never spoken to anybody else about this experience. So I don't know whether this is something that, people find universally with pottery. But I think just because there's so many sort of technical aspects to it, there's so much you're having to learn in terms of your just practicing, making loads of mistakes and getting stuff, things not working out, things cracking apart, or things coming out of the kiln in a weird way that you weren't anticipating. So I think that that pottery can be particularly frustrating, perhaps maybe more than any other kind of creative practices, not like any other one, but it's certainly up there with some of the most, sort of just in terms of how easy it is to kind of pick up and put down and just learn, basically. So this is why I think being kind to yourself is particularly important in pottery. So let me tell you a story about when I first started going to pottery classes. So I was quite young. I was about 11, and I used to go to pottery classes at the local community centre. I used to go after school every week, and I used to have these big visions in my mind of like stuff I wanted to make, and they usually centered around making a kind of scene, like a very elaborate scene. If you think about like a stage set or something, and so there was one which I wanted to make, which was like kind of like an underwater scene, and then I had another one which was like a house scene, and it had like all the furniture and like different floors and stairs, and so they were quite sort of elaborate projects. And what I would find often is that my mental picture, what I wanted to make, was different than the reality that I could actually physically make with my hands and my skill level. And I used to find this incredibly frustrating. And quite often I would sort of just get so frustrated, like at the end of the class, that I would actually just like squash the thing I was making. And the teacher was so kind. She was such a good teacher. She just used to come sort of like hover around at the end and just say like, before you squash your work, please just like, let me know, we can talk about it. Maybe there's something, we can do to fix it, and just like a really kind of gentle approach. But sometimes I would just get so frustrated that I just had to like, start from scratch again, basically. So that's not modeling being kind to yourself. So, like, just to say, I just think it can be so disappointing in pottery. It feels like it's all or nothing. It's like either it's this perfect vision in my mind, or it's worthless, I don't want it anymore, sort of thing. So that's the where my mind used to go. I'd just be like, oh, it's not perfect, I don't want it. But basically, until you've made those pathways in terms of like being able to have that muscle memory of knowing what that particular type of clay does, which you only learn through getting things wrong, like trial and error, like until you have that, until you've matched up, like, you practice using it, you've matched up what's in your mind and like what you can make, which is kind of an ever evolving process. Until that happens, it is going to be really frustrating. So I think being kind to yourself, that's why I'm saying that is like my number one pottery making tip. Okay, so what does being kind to yourself actually involve when we talk about being kind to yourself in pottery? So I've written some things down that I just wanted to just discuss with you and see what you think to this. So the first thing is that I think being kind to yourself in pottery is congratulating yourself for your pottery practice. So if we think about pottery, rather than like, an end result, we think about it as like a constant practice, which we just, it's a bit like yoga, in the sense that, one day you might be doing something, next day you might be doing something else, and you think that your skill's gone down or whatever. It's just like, it's a constant practice. It's more about that constant practice and the process rather than the outcome. So I think, firstly, it's really good to congratulate yourself on just having that practice, because it is challenging and you are growing so much and you are learning so much. So congratulations to you for, trying pottery and practicing. So the next thing to say in terms of being kind to yourself is to really keep in your mind that pottery is not meant to be perfect. Okay, so I would quite often feel disappointed when I got something out of the kiln, or if I was in a class, the teacher would get it out of the kiln, it would be on the shelf, and I just think, I don't like it. I'm disappointed because it didn't match up to what like my mind had made. I thought it was going to be like one way, and then it came out a different way. And so I think like it's really important to think of this, because like in terms of like what pottery actually is. Pottery is a kind of expression. It's almost like an expression of that person making whatever they're making onto that clay, and that is imperfect, so let's like get away from like perfection, because actually the idea of pottery is that it's meant to have that mark of the maker. It's meant to have those imperfections. That is the kind of human impact of like the maker on that pot. And pottery is not meant to be perfect. It's a beautiful organic thing And that's what it's meant to look like. It's meant to have those imperfections, those marks. That's where the beauty of it comes from. So I think I still remind myself of this every time I open the kiln. Pottery's not meant to be perfect. And like, you know, what maybe looks imperfect to you looks incredible to someone else, you know, like maybe your friend has never been to a pottery class and they just think it's absolutely incredible that you're making a pot, you know. So I think that's really important to hold in your head as well. Like one person's imperfection is another person's sort of like absolute beauty in that thing. So yeah, so that's what another being kind to yourself looks like in pottery. Okay, another thing to say is that remember how far you've come. So, you know, even if you've been going to pottery classes for like 2 weeks, do you remember, you know, maybe at the beginning you've literally never even touched clay before, whereas, you know, week 2 you've rolled some clay out or something, you know. So it's just like you're constantly learning, and it's really just having that kind of you know, being kind to yourself about how far you've come and how much you've learned, and really keeping that in your mind. And you're learning all the time, you know, just more and more and more. And it's just it's about just holding that just amazing capacity for learning, you know, in your practice, and your idea of like, you know, being kind to yourself about it. So I think this comes on to the fourth point, which is like, it's really important to think that when things go inverted commas wrong, using those inverted commas, you know, quite often they're almost like the best things that can happen. They're teaching you so much about the way the clay is working, the way glazes are working, the way, you know, different tools and techniques, different ways of doing things. And sometimes even you can even discover something brilliant. You know, if you put 2 glazes on accidentally, you know, you accidentally dipped one, there's drip down the side or whatever, and then it kind of turns out to this like incredible color or something, you know. So it's like, I think it's just, yeah, just thinking, reframing when you think things have gone wrong, actually, you're really learning. That is your growth edge, and that is when you're really learning the most, and you're really stretching your skills. You know, things wouldn't, inverted commas, go wrong unless you were really at the edge of your skills and experience. So that is a really important to be, particularly when you feel like things, inverted commas, have gone wrong. Just be really kind to yourself then, and know that this is like an essential part of like the learning process. So yeah, so those are the 4 ways I think that in pottery you can be like kind to yourself, and just in terms of like just having a growth mindset, you know, in general, just thinking, okay, well, I don't know something now, but I'm learning all the time, and you know, there'll be a point where I do know how to do this, you know, with constant practice. Just not constant practice like every day. I just mean like, you know, if you're going to evening classes or something every week, you know, that's constant practice, and you know, it's just really nice to think of yourself like, I will get there. It's just like, you know, to wherever you want to go, wherever there is. But just kind of enjoying the process, the learning process, the growing process, you know, and just knowing that you have the capacity to learn pretty much anything you want to, especially in pottery. So yeah, if you're interested in pottery, you can learn it. You know, if you're following your joy, you can learn it. So yeah, what does being kind to yourself allow you to do? Okay, so I really think that being kind to yourself really focuses you on the process of making rather than the outcome of something. And you know, I'm telling you this like, you know, I practice this a lot. This is something I have been trying to learn, you know, trying to practice, learning, because, you know, I guess the thing is, when you do any kind of creative practice, you are kind of, it's this weird thing where you know, you're expecting an outcome, and you think like, oh yeah, I want it to be great in the end. But I think trying to reframe that as like, there is so much joy in the process, and that is almost the point of it, not the outcome, has been, I think, just really changed the level of joy I feel when I'm doing pottery as well. So it's just like switching it from like it having to be some kind of end vision in your mind to like it being like the process is the most important part. So being kind to yourself really allows you to be in that process, which is really where the joy is in pottery. And so it also really, being kind to yourself also really does allow you to learn better. So imagine if, like, say you're trying to learn something and there's someone like standing over you and they're just saying, that's rubbish, you'll never learn that, that's really bad, you shouldn't have done that, you should be listening to the teacher more, you've made a mistake there, everyone's going to laugh at you. You know, how hard is it to learn in, you know, with like those kind of, those, someone saying that to you? Or, you know, well, that's what quite often, you know, especially people who have a creative practice, they often have this critical voice, I think, which is just like, I mean, you know, really not helpful. You know, I know I do, you know, in terms of like, you need to do this, you need to, you know, just kind of just this constant kind of narration of like what's happening. And like, you cannot learn under those circumstances. Well, you can, but it's much more difficult. And they're just like, you know, sucks the joy out of your learning process. Imagine if you had someone really encouraging and kind sitting next to you and just saying like, well done for practicing. This is amazing. Like, you know, just think of how far you've come. Just think of all the things you've learned. This is amazing. Like, you know, just just being really excited about like all the ways you're growing and learning. Imagine that. It'd be so much easier to learn. So this is part of why being kind to yourself is super important when you're learning any new thing. Everybody makes mistakes. That's how you learn. Making mistakes is part of the learning process. You cannot separate making mistakes in inverted commas from learning. They're just intrinsically linked because that's how you learn, basically. So by being kind to yourself, it really allows you that nurturing space to learn. And that goes with, you know, that goes for anything you're learning. You know, just supporting yourself through that learning process. You know, I think about, you know, when you think about starting a new jobs and stuff, and you have that feeling where you're just like, I don't know anything, but you know, it's like you'll get there. It's just like, it's just giving yourself that kindness to learn it. So and the final way that I think being kind to yourself is like, you know, really opens up loads of doors in pottery, really opens up your creative practice, is that it stops you putting limits on your own creativity. So by being kind to yourself, you know that you're always there to support yourself, in terms of like, your ideas. When you get an idea, being kind to yourself allows you to really explore those ideas with curiosity, and not just, it stops your creativity from being limited by those kind of, that negative self-talk, basically. So it stops your ideas from being blocked. So, and when you unlock your ideas, when you kind of just practice having ideas, more ideas, practicing putting them into practice, creating, it unlocks even more ideas. So that's another reason that being kind to yourself is really important in pottery. It just creates that, like I said, nurturing space for more ideas to come. So it's been so nice talking to you about this. And like I said, like my kind of being kind to myself creative practice isn't perfect. It's like a constant, work in progress, and like it is, for many people. And but I just kind of, that's one of the reasons why I recorded this episode, because I just, it's so nice sometimes to hear someone else, in terms of this is something that a lot of people go through, basically, especially if you have a creative practice. Like I said, you can have those those critical voices that come up and stuff, but it really stops you from flourishing. So that's what this episode has been, hoping to kind of enlighten that kind of that part of it. So it's been so nice talking to you about my number one pottery making tip, being kind to yourself, and I hope this episode has been helpful. And just be super kind to yourself this week in terms of your creative practice and in all areas of your life. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you on the next episode, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me for the Oxford Clay Pottery podcast. If you're interested in learning more about Oxford Clay or eco-conscious pottery, there's so much for you on the Oxford Clay website. There's books, e-courses, there's a blog on there, loads of other podcast episodes, and I can't wait to share it with you. The web address is oxfordclay.co.uk. I'll see you over there.